you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Lori Berman. I'm the Vice President of Membership and Development for the Small Business Association of Michigan. You are joining one of our webinar series today that we have for you. We offer to our members across the state. SBAM has over 26,000 small business members across the state of Michigan. We're happy to have you on this call today. And I'll tell you about a couple upcoming calls before we go. Next month, we are featuring a webinar on best practices for avoiding IRS trouble. And then in the month of November, we're doing a webinar called When Employees Post Vengeful Things Online. So watch our website for more information or your Small Business Weekly newsletter for these upcoming events and programs. These webinars are offered to you free as a benefit of your membership with the Small Business Association of Michigan. So thank you for joining us. With us today, our presenter is Joe Marr. Joe is an active member of the Small Business Association of Michigan. He's a member of our Leadership Council. Joe has been a trainer on other events and been a great member and engaged with the Small Business Association. Joe has over 30 years of experience in organizing, training, coaching, and managing sales professionals and sales managers worldwide. So Joe, we appreciate you being here today and speaking to our members, helping them to understand why businesses need a process for sales. So Joe, I will let you take it away, but before I do, attendees, if you have questions, feel free to post them on the chat feature and we'll get to them at the end of today's call. So Joe, I give it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laurie, and thank you for everybody who's attending today. Again, my name is Joe Marr, and I run a business in Ann Arbor called Sandler Training. You might have heard of it. We're a global training firm that has 270 training centers worldwide. I'm an independent business owner, and that's why I'm involved in the Small Business Association of Michigan, where I really rely on the SBAM to keep me informed about policy and things going on, particularly in state government that affect small business and my small business. But how I pay my bills is I work with mostly small businesses who come to me when they're struggling to bring new customers or to command the kind of margins that they need to command from their customers to stay profitable. And we help them by bringing a process to all the aspects of their selling effort and hopefully develop a selling culture within even a very small company. And, that's from prospecting to gaining more referrals, to penetrating new markets and segments, to diversifying their customer base. And we do that through training, coaching, and a lot of continuous reinforcement with the sales and management personnel in the company. So we work with companies that are, from $100,000 annual revenue to, you might have heard of General Motors. We've actually worked with General Motors. So, and everything in between, but pretty much companies less than 200 employees. So today, we're going to dive into this, why businesses, or why you should consider having a process for your sales effort. And in most businesses, especially small businesses, the sales process is almost an afterthought. It's really kind of a default process that just evolves from trial and error over time. And while, most small businesses work hard to develop process, a lot of people are doing the traction thing, the Gino Wickman EOS process for managing the team. A lot of companies spend a lot of time developing processes and procedures for almost every other aspect of their business, but the sales seems to be more of a black box for most businesses. They hope they hire a salesperson who has the skill to do what they need them to do, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, that's where we come in. So it's not going to be a sales pitch today. I'm going to give you a peek under the tent of the processes that we teach and what's foundational for them. What's the underlying psychology and culture, business culture behind it, and then give you an idea how you might consider resequencing your process to just be more efficient and effective in sales. And so my hope is you come away with something you can use today, even if we never cross paths. But if you decide, I say something that makes sense to you, that you might want to have a one-on-one conversation with me about, then just go ahead and shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to talk to you about it. So that's how we're getting started here. The agenda is we're going to really take a look at what are the most common sales problems. And I've been doing this about 17 years now. Started this business on September 10th, 2001, which was really a great day to start a business if you think about it. But beyond the fourth quarter of 2001, we've been working. I've heard a lot of problems, a lot of issues that especially small businesses have with sales, with their sales people, with their sales management. And so I'm going to share with you what I see account for about 90% of the problems they bring to me. Then I'm going to share with you, what's behind it. Where do these, not so much the symptoms, the problems that they're conscious of, but what are the root causes that lead businesses and salespeople and sales organizations to get into trouble. And then I'm finally going to share with you how we beat it. What's the process we apply to help people to just get more efficient and effective at sales. So that's what's on the plate for this webinar today. So here it is. Here's the list. This accounts for about 90% of the problems I hear about. So take a look, and I'd be interested to know if you want to chat to Lori if you see any of yours on that list. They're struggling to raise prices, don't know how to do it without losing important customers. They feel like they're giving away too much information about their product or service, maybe even given instructions detailed enough for their potential customer to do it in-house. So unpaid consulting. In other words, giving away the store without getting a single dime for the effort. Their guys aren't particularly effective at, they may have a beachhead somewhere with a client or customer, but not really good at cross or upselling and getting the other business opportunities or identifying and closing them in accounts. Maybe customers aren't particularly loyal, so they tend to jump around to whoever's got the lowest bid on particular orders, and so customer retention is a challenge. Or they're given presentations that really don't lead to any kind of sale. Stalls and objections, yeah, you get the point here. There's a lot here, but these are the things I hear mostly from salespeople and sales managers that they're dealing with in their business, whether they're selling it almost doesn't matter whether it's a product or service. It's from the very first time a salesperson and a prospect have a human to human interaction to figure out what the prospect needs and building a proposal, presenting it in a way to closing it or not. The lesson number one in that first slide is, just about every business, all of us, and whatever business you're in, we're all dealing with the same stuff. It's, a lot of times business owners come to me and, they're skeptical and they wonder, who's this sales guy? He knows nothing about my industry, nothing about my business. How can he possibly help me solve a problem? Well, it's what I found after working with over 500 businesses in 17 years, and even a couple of businesses before this business, is that most of the problems in sales are universal and really aren't specific to an industry or a market or a particular company. And so I think there's a little bit of comfort that comes from knowing that, if you look at that list I just presented to you, that you're not alone if you're dealing with any of those problems. So that's lesson number one. It's kind of universal. So I would like you to take a moment and write down how much your biggest sales problem costs you. And if you're a CEO or president, you can look at the top line or bottom line. I don't care. Whatever's the number you measure yourself on. If you're a salesperson, how much is it costing you in commission? So again, just write down a number, pick a biggest problem, and if it's not one on my list, you can write that down, and then write down what it's costing you. So that's the second step. The third step on this slide is I'd like you to take a moment. One thing I know to be true is that if you're not really committed to fixing the problem, if you're not well, let me first ask you to give yourself a score on how committed you are on a scale of 1 to 10. 1, I can live with it. It's probably just a part of my industry, so I'm not going to worry about it and just take the results as they come. 10, I'm absolutely committed. It's crucial to the solvency of my business. I'm going to solve it. Write down a number on where you are on that scale. So the next thing I'd ask you to do is if it's less than 10 or it's less than 9, I'll give you a little slack. If it's less than 10, it's not likely to get resolved, because in order to fix the problems that are costing you, maybe 6 figures, maybe 7 figures in either potential new revenue or lost revenue or lost profit, if it's not a 10 priority to fix it, you're going to work on other priorities that are a little easier to handle, a little easier to put your arms around. So let's start with that premise. But I'm going to share with you where most, if not all, of those problems come from. And it really comes from the fact that, well, I got here totally by accident. How about you? Did you set out to become a salesperson? Like when you were a child and you were thinking about what was your career aspiration? Where were you going to go in your life? What were you going to pursue? What were you going to make your career? Were you running around the house saying, I'm going to be the best salesperson in the world when I grow up? I asked that question to literally hundreds of people, and almost everyone says no. Now, the only people that say yes happen to have a parent, a mother or father who was engaged in sales, and certainly they were going to emulate them. But generally speaking, almost everybody gets into sales by accident. So that's a challenge. So if we get into sales by accident and then we go to, before that, our foundation in business school, maybe we got a Bachelor of Business or we got an MBA, and we really maybe we're thinking of a different career track. But as we went through our business curriculum in most colleges, now it's changed to CMU and Western and Toledo, and a lot of schools are now offering sales major programs. But I worked with the Eastern Michigan University Business Curriculum Advisory Board for a couple of years, and one of the challenges they had was they wanted to do a sales program. I believe they are running one now. But one of the challenges that they really couldn't answer was, what do you do if someone graduates with a degree in sales, a major in sales and business, that can't sell? It's kind of a challenge. And so one of the challenges for the academic model is imparting the skills, the soft and hard skills of being effective in sales. And most universities really aren't equipped to do it. Now, but for centuries, universities hardly touched the issue of sales. Most, when I went to school back in the 80s, the extent of sales treated in the business curriculum was references to microeconomics issues, and really little about what I think is the single most important aspect of sales, and that's the one-on-one interaction between a selling party and a buying party. That's kind of where the rubber hits the road for almost every business. And so I got to wonder, why is it that most universities never really considered trying to educate and graduate their business students with any sales proficiency? Well, I would argue that it's probably mostly because of the stigma associated with sales. Now, I happen to think sales is a noble profession, but the culture, I mean, I think it's fair to say the culture really doesn't see it that way. Salespeople are kind of an unsavory profession for most lay people, most people in the workplace. And if we're small businesses and entrepreneurs, if we're the CEO or owner or president of our little business, we're a salesperson. Newsflash, if you hadn't figured that out, you're in sales. Actually, you're really in sales when you're trying to sell anything, an idea, sell an employee on taking like a step that you need them to take or work in a project. I mean, we're selling every day, all day. Yet the culture generally regards salespeople, again, as unsavory. So if we were going to play the game password and I gave you the secret word salesman, what clue words would you use to get your opponent to guess the secret word salesman? What clue words? When you think of, I mean, is there anything positive? Would you say customer oriented or reliable and honest? Or would you use any clue words like that? Or would it be something different like slimy or snake oil or some other term that, you know, used car that would describe somebody who maybe is perceived in the culture as unsavory, especially if there was money riding on it. It's a game show and there's $1 million riding on it. I'm guessing you would use snake oil or some other negative term. So because of the reason I bring this up is that the culture has a lot of programming that is negative about salespeople. And that causes us to maybe fear being perceived as a salesperson, even if that's how we're going to make our business work. So what do you do about it? I mean, psychologists say about 77% of human behavior is what is considered program behavior, meaning we behave very predictably given a certain circumstance or certain context. For example, if I were to say to you, how are you today, Laurie? How might you answer, Laurie? Laurie's got a mute button on. Laurie'd probably say, fine, thank you.
I got to it. Sorry, it took me a minute to get to mute.
How are you today? How are you today, Laurie?
Doing well. I'm doing great. Thank you for asking, Joe. How about yourself?
You know, and Laurie's a nice person, and she would say that even if she was having a crappy day. Fair?
True, true.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a program behavior. It's not a genuine communication exchange. It's perfunctory. It's protocol, and so we have all this programming about sales, and you know, a lot of it is to defend against a sales assault. And if we understand that, then we can take some measures and apply some tactics to get beyond them. You know, the other thing I'm going to ask you to, in your own mind, normally I do this in a group and everybody says it out loud, but I'd like you to, just to prove the point a little further about the programming we bring into our lives, into sales, into business. I'd like you to finish these sentences that I'll start for you. So just go ahead and to yourself, say out loud, never talk to, I'm sure you all said strangers. How about speak when, always wear clean. Now that one, maybe just some of you heard, but in my household, it was underwear. You know, it was mom's interest that if I ever got hit by a bus, that nobody would shame her for not having clean underwear on her boy. You know, so that was my programming. Maybe you have it too. How about never run with? Okay, so we've got all this programming. And let me just point out that I'm guessing most of you could finish, if not all of you, could finish each one of those sentences without a hesitation, without having to think about it. It just boom. And you might not have heard that expression for years, maybe decades. What does that say about the programming? What does it say if it's that close to the surface? We like to think we've evolved beyond it. Reality is it's playing some part in how we feel and how we respond and how we react in a sales situation. So for example, if I'm a salesperson and I need to make cold calls to hit my number, to get enough prospects in my pipeline, to qualify enough of those prospects and then close enough sales to hit my number, and I've got a heavy dose of programming about never talking to strangers, it's going to be difficult, maybe even paralyzing, the notion I got to pick up the phone and call somebody who's a stranger, right? The other, that what's going on there is that I'm calling somebody I've never talked to before. And my mother is in the back of my head saying, never talk to strangers, Joey. And certainly don't accept candy. Okay, so I know it sounds crazy, but most people, or many people I worked with over the years, fear prospecting worse than death. They would rather die than have to do cold calling all day long, for example. And a lot of that has to do with that irrational fear of cold calling. It has to do with the heavy dose of programming that was important programming. When mom told me not to talk to strangers, that was pretty important at 8, 9, 10 years old. Unfortunately, we carry that programming forward and it gets in our way, in our head, when we need to make dials to build our business. So the other thing is that people on the other end, the people that we call, the phone rings, they pick it up the phone and they answer and they hear a voice they've never heard before. Whose voice is playing in the back of their head and what's he or she saying? I mean, it's the same message. They're suffering the never talk to strangers message as well. So if you think about it, and I know this to be true after working again with over 500 businesses in 17 years and hundreds and hundreds of salespeople, is the biggest obstacles we have in sales and being effective in sales are between our own ears and the programming we carry into the sales situation. So that's a bit of a backdrop. Now we're going to go into process. So we're in accidental salespeople, and I'm going to call something the buyer-seller dance. And there is a default sales model that exists in business culture, and this is a human condition issue. It's worldwide. It's not exclusive to the U.S. or Michigan, for that matter. It is a default big picture, step-by-step process that we default to if we don't learn a process that's more effective. And the first step in the sales process, in the sales system, is we're going to make contact with the prospect and probe for needs. We're going to attempt to discern what needs they have that we might fulfill. And then our second step is we're going to present, propose, quote, bid, demo, etc. We're going to attempt to show them how we will resolve their needs. The third step is we attempt to close it. So hopefully we hit the mark and they decide, yes, indeed, I want to buy your stuff. But in most business models, most companies I talk to, typically run a 10 to 25% close rate as a rule. That's before they work with us, but when they come to us, they're generally run 10 to 25%. And so that means that most of the time, this third step is a trial close, and it opens up a discussion about objections. So the prospect is raising objections, and we are attempting to resolve them or handle them, is what we call it. So the fourth step is one of the toughest ones, and that's follow-up. So we've got a pending proposal out there, and we haven't heard word back. They raised objections. They maybe said they wanted to think about it. They wanted to run it up the flagpole. They wanted to talk with the partners about it, or whatever the rationale for delay was. They want to sit on it, and so we put them in a follow-up loop, which involves maybe making a phone call like, "Hi, Laurie, this is Joe Mark calling, and just touching base to find out where we are on the proposal. You know, we talked about maybe commencing with the project on Monday, and if we're gonna get the project off the ground on Monday, I really probably need to have the PO for it by tomorrow morning, Friday morning. So if you could please give me a call back, I'd appreciate it, and let me know where we are." Click. That's a typical follow-up. I've worked with Salesforce.com and one of their consultants, Torrent Consulting, here in Ann Arbor. And one of the Salesforce surveys found that something like 62% of salespeople's time is devoted to this follow-up activity, around 62%. Now, I want you to remember that number, because we're going to move over to the prospect system, which is the business culture default prospects system that's at work, that really drives this default sales system. So 62% follow-up. So the first step in the buyer or prospect system is they're wary. We're attempting, going in with our eyes wide open, hoping that they'll be open enough for us to discern what their needs are, and yet they tend to hold it back. They tend to hold their cards close to their vest. And at the very worst, they can even lie to us, tell us, be less than truthful, for fear that, you know, if they're truthful and they share how badly they need us or badly they need the product or service we have to offer, that we might take advantage of them. So they're wary out of the gate. Now, they might hear something from us that sounds interesting or valuable, and so they ask us for information. Maybe give us a quote, give us a bid, give us a plan, give us a scope of work, something. Give us your brochure. Tell us how you would deal with this issue. Now, why? There's a couple reasons they ask us for this information. And sometimes they ask for it even if they have no intention of doing business with us. Maybe they already have a favored source or vendor for our product or service, yet they still want to see our quote. They still want to see our plan, our proposal, our suggestion. And so the motivation for that, I think you can discern, is one is maybe they want it as a stick. Maybe they're hoping they're going to get a better price from us, for example, and they can use that as leverage to get a better price from the people they really want to do business with. So we give them information for zero commitment on their part. There's no skin in the game on their part. Now, the other reason is they might be gathering that information to just make sure they're getting a fair shake from the person they're already dealing with. So whatever the reason, well, and sometimes it's because they have a procurement protocol that requires they get 3, 5, 10 bids on everything they purchase, and we're just helping them fulfill that, again, with no intention of doing business with us. One of the things that we teach our clients to do is to be careful not to have happy ears. And what I mean by that as a salesperson is to extrapolate what or misinterpret what the real motive is of a prospect that asks us for a quote. So for example, I think it's wrong to celebrate when somebody says they're letting us quote on this. Or another favorite of mine is we're on the short list. Now, it may sound positive, maybe sound better to you to be on a list of 3 instead of a list of 2 alternatives that they're considering. But I want you to consider that maybe they're not telling the person that they're preferring or the person that's wired for the project that they're on the short list. They're probably telling that person that's wired, it's yours to lose, pal. We're looking good, but I've got this quote from company B and company C, and you're going to have to work with us to, maybe come a little closer to what they're presenting to us. So in any case, be careful not to think that being on the short list is a positive thing. It often isn't. It often is just a way to continue to keep you free consulting them. So the third step is they might even come back to us. They get our package and they say, wow, this is awesome. Love it. Oh man, you really did a nice job presenting your service. In fact, the color-coded index tabs on the binder and really made it easier for us to follow. And you've done our company a real service by quoting. If I have my way, when we go over the 3 packages next week, I'm thinking we're going to be going your way. Now, why would they say that if, again, maybe they don't have any real belief they're going to do business with us? Why would they say that? Now, one is maybe they have a conscience and they feel bad that they kind of slimed us or that they took advantage of us for free consulting to help them with their purchasing process. Again, maybe they have no conscience. Maybe they think, well, I want to keep the pipeline for this free consulting open so that I can, again, gather free consulting again when I need it to fill out, to fulfill my purchasing protocol. So again, they're not bad people. They're just using the model that's worked for them forever. Fourth step in the buyer or prospect system, and this is, again, if people are closing at 10 to 25%, they find themselves with a prospect who is deep cover about, anywhere from 75 to 90% of the time. In other words, this prospect who's been imminently available all along the way, and the process is now impossible to get a hold of. They're on vacation, they're in a meeting, their dog died. I mean, you fill in the blank. You've probably heard some yourself. So what I would argue is this 4th step on the right side, the default sales system, is really chasing maybe a prospective customer who is really just a suspect, not a prospect. Is really chasing them because we've never given them permission to tell us no. So that's one of the first lessons as we look at this system. If you want to clear your desk of 70, if you're spending 60, 70% of your time in follow-up mode on pending proposals and you're getting stalled and pushed out and pushed out and pushed out, why don't you offer up the option for them to tell you no? So you can clear your radar screen from all the crap that's on it and focus your effort and energy on the people, the prospects in your pipeline who are really in a position to do business. So that's lesson number 2 in today's webinar. I hope that hits home for you. Hope this is familiar to you. Hope it doesn't hurt too bad to see it actually mapped out the way we have. Laurie, do you have you received any questions that you'd like me to answer at this point in time?
I have not received any. I am monitoring questions, so go ahead and post them, folks, if you have questions. I do have that screen open.
Okay, I'll move on then. So
actually, Joe, I take that back. I see somebody posted a chat feature.
Okay,
It says customers think I can give discount because it's just me. For example, why do I need to make so much on an item? Hashtag true, meaning by accident. So I guess it was more of a comment that customers always want a discount when they know they might be working with a sole prop. Is that what it sounds like?
Well, they don't know with any certainty what are the costs of you running your business, and so I guess my advice would be is never defend your price. Never try to explain why you're asking for why you're asking. It's one of my favorite responses when someone says, "Well, Joe, why does your training cost so much?" I'm a small business, so you don't have a lot of overhead like me, like my big empire of a company. So why do you charge so much for your? And I say, well, let me ask you, what's this person's name, Laurie? Can you tell me
Let me get
his
back.
first name? You don't have to.
Yeah, I don't see it.
But if it's Jim, I'm going to say, Jim, why do you imagine that my customers, my clients, happily pay the prices I charge? Rather than defend my price, I ask the person who challenged my price why they think my customers pay it.
Okay.
And then whatever answer they come up with is their data. They're going to rationalize my price before I am. And then I'm also going to say, but Jim, I appreciate your concern about my pricing. And, it's okay. We don't have to do business. I'm really okay with it.
Okay, we do have another question, and I do see the name. This one looks like it's from Greg. The question is, where do you like to see seller giving prospect permission to say no in the follow-up message?
Well, actually, we're going to talk about it in a minute, Greg. In our process, we actually give them an opportunity to tell us no and reassure them that we're completely happy with a no really early at the very beginning of our vetting each other out. But if we are in this position where we have a pending quote and we're getting stalled and they're hiding and they're not responding to our voicemail or email follow-up, then I would, again, try one more time, attempt to get them directly on the phone. And if that doesn't work, I would send an email, but the message would be pretty much the same. And it would be, Greg, hi, I appreciate the opportunity to quote you. I'm guessing since I haven't heard back from you, and it's been a month or it's been 2 weeks or whatever, that you've decided to go in another direction, and that's okay. I would appreciate a courtesy reply to just let me know so I can take you off my list. Kind regards, Joe Marr. And I would say that in a voicemail, essentially that in a voicemail or an email. And in fact, that's what I do with my clients at the very beginning, because almost all of them have a stack of pending quotes on their desk that are in the stall. And I just challenge them to do that. And they come back to me and they clear out. About 20% come back and say, no, I was busy. I'm bottled up. Sorry I didn't get back to you. It's still a live project. We're gonna get back to you in a day or in a week or whatever, but it puts it back in motion again for about 20% of the time. About 20% of the time, you'll get some people respond and say, yes, you're right, Joe, we went another direction. Thank you for quoting or whatever. And then the other 60% don't answer at all. And they're the same as the latter. Once you send that, you should put them in the dead file. You send that message and don't hear anything back, put them in the dead file. Take them off your pipeline. Now, sometimes they trickle back and there was a good reason. But most of the time, those are people, again, who just decide they'd rather not reject you, rather not deal with that awkward moment, so they just as soon hide from you. And so that's my tactic for getting the truth back about an open bid or open pending proposal. Okay, Greg?
Thank you, Joe. And then there is one more question from Chad, and it related to the first question that we had from Carol about pricing. Chad's question was, you should not justify the value of your product. So when someone was questioning you about price, Chad's wondering, should you justify the value of your product? Or should
Well,
you?
value and price are two different things. Never defend your price. And my belief is that you demonstrate value by your expertise in, this is a whole nother training segment, so I can't get into too much detail about it, but I really believe you demonstrate your competence to your prospect by the questions you ask more than what you tell them. Because if you think about it, if you just go on and on about the features and benefits and why you charge what you charge and why it's worth what you charge, you just sound like a commercial. And I don't know about you, but I don't believe half of what I hear on commercials. Fair?
Yeah.
So my job is not to try to convince them of the value of my product. My challenge is getting them to discover the value of my product. And the other thing I'd say is if for example, they've come to me and they said, hey, Joe, yours is 20 grand and I was talking to this other outfit that's doing it for 12. How can you charge so much? I got to ask myself, my next question is, gosh, Laurie, I appreciate you coming back to let me know you're going with that other outfit. And they said, well, why do you say that? I said, well, gosh, if it's the same thing for 12 grand, why wouldn't you? Okay, so just consider if they're talking to you and they supposedly found an alternative for much less than what you charge, what are they talking to you for? Why didn't they just buy the one that was less? And so my main point is they're hoping they can do business with you, or they wouldn't even be talking to you about it. So just understand where you are and the psychology of it when it happens, and
Right.
be smart. Don't defend your price. You're not going to do business with everyone. Not everyone's qualified to be your customer. And that's okay. If you need to charge what you need to charge to make the kind of profit margin you need to make, then defend it. That's the wrong word. You don't defend it by trying to explain why it's cost as much. Defend it by holding the line on it and just being okay with it. Maybe turn some people away.
Okay, that's it for questions now.
Okay. So I ask you to, some of the stuff I'm talking about here really requires a bit of a recalibration for most people. And I want to, I'm going to share with you our process for beating what we've already covered here in the default systems. And I want to challenge you to avoid saying to yourself, well, I'm pretty much already doing that, because I don't want you to look for the nuance, because that's where the value in this is. It's a subtlety. You can't be doing 75% of it and it being effective. Everything that I'm going to share with you in a minute, there's a reason for it, and it's part of what gains the efficiency. I'm not saying you can adopt it immediately. I'm just saying be careful not to dismiss it offhand. Consider the concept. The other thing I'd ask you to do is some of the stuff I'm going to share with you is going to smack against your sensibilities. It's going to sound upside down from what maybe you think is true about sales. And I want you to avoid saying to yourself, I could never do that. You could never do it the way I state it with the verbiage I use, but I want you to consider how you might adopt the concept and use it, use your own wording to apply the same concept. So those are the challenges I want to make to you before we go into the next couple of slides. So one of the things when we look at sales, we see in a sales interaction, there's 4 positive results that can come of it. One is obviously to close the sale, a yes. But what may not be as self-evident or as apparent is that our second best outcome on a sale is to get a sales interaction is to get a fast no. Now, the reason for that is that we don't want to spend 62% of our time pursuing people who are never going to do business with us. So we want to be really effective at qualifying and disqualifying. And that the more we disqualify people that just aren't a good fit for us, the more time we have to devote to the people who are a good fit. So that's the second best. We call it the silver medal in sales. And whether we get a yes or a no in an interaction, we should always strive to make it easy for them to introduce us or refer us to someone else, even from a no. Now, you won't always get them, but if you don't aren't intentional about asking for them and have some grace and finesse about asking for them, then they're very unlikely to give you some. I assure you, they're not standing around saying, "Gosh, I wonder if Joe would appreciate another piece of business." They're not. So we want to make it easy for them to think of people that we could meet that could mean something to our business. The fourth positive outcome from a sales interaction is getting a clear future. And I want to distinguish this from, "Hey, why don't you call me next month and we'll see where we are." That is not a clear future. That's probably a put off. A clear future is, "Okay, gosh, I really want to do a program with you, Joe, but until the 2019 budget is finalized, I really can't pull the trigger on anything. So how about we get together in mid-November, November 10th at 10 a.m., and I'll know the budget by then, and we can flesh out our plan for 2019. That's a clear future. So sometimes they're not ready to say yes just because maybe there's no budget for it this year, and they want to make sure they get approval on the budget before they can make a final firm commitment. So those are the four positive results of a sales call, sales interaction, as far as we're concerned. Any other questions crop up, Lori?
No, none at present, Joe.
Okay. So here's the process. This is the process that I teach, and I've been teaching for 17 years now. It's the first two steps. So one is we're going to do something we call a pattern interrupt. And what that means is we're going to do whatever it takes not to sound, act, feel, smell, be perceived as a salesperson. And there's a whole lot of psychology around human bonding and rapport. I suggest you look into it. You read books on why people trust people, and our job is to establish a fast trust. We just need them transparent enough to tell us what's really going on. And to do that, we can't sound like we're there to pitch our product. We got to sound like we're there to roll up our sleeves and help them with a problem or a challenge. The second step really reinforces the first step, and that's our verbal upfront contract. And that's what UFC stands for. We're going to let them know where we're taking them, and we're going to assert, and I'm going to share with them what I imagine their agenda is. Lori, I'm guessing that you're going to want to get together and ask me questions about my training program, what kind of time and money investments required, and what kind of results that we typically see when we work with a client. And then at the end of that conversation, I'm going to ask a lot of questions to get clarity about how your business model works, Lori. And the end of the conversation, I'm going to let you know if I can prescribe something I think will work for you. But are you okay if we spend the time together and I tell you, "Gosh, I'm not sure I can help you, Laurie"? Is that going to be okay if we take a close look at this? On the other hand, if we figure out there is something I can help you with, and you can imagine investing the time and the money to do it, then we'll put some dates on the calendar. You'll issue a PO, and we'll get started with the program. Those are the two outcomes, right? That's what we're talking about getting together for. Just want to make sure I'm clear. So that's an example of a upfront contract I might set with Lori. And notice one feature. I told her before I shared with her the positive outcome of actually her signing with me a deal, before I even mentioned that, I mentioned it's possible we're not going to come to terms. I wanted to reassure her that at the end of this interaction, I'm not assuming we're going to be doing business. And that's another bonding and rapport step. It really reinforces the trust they have. They have no reason to hide and be wary and not be open with information if they know they've got an exit ramp at the end of the conversation. And I'm not going to fight them about it. Okay. So once we do that, we're going to go into our qualification questions, and we're going to find out if they have any compelling reasons to do business with us. That's what we're going to do. And we call it pain. It's a little more than needs. It's deeper than needs. It's not only what they want or think they want, it's why they want it and what's going to happen if they don't get it. What's the consequence? What's the impact? And how do they feel about that? And that's what we call pain. And we find if they are open with us what they're struggling with and what their pain is about the compelling need, then they're more likely to want to work harder with us to figure out how to find the time and money and effort required to make it happen. And I don't know about you, but I find that the time and effort can often be the biggest obstacle, even more than money when we're talking about budget. Well, how much time and effort do they have to put into adopting us versus nobody, or versus the alternative, the incumbent we're dealing with? And finally, I'm going to find out the who, what, why, when, where, and how of their decision process. And I want to know all that stuff because I don't want to have any illusions about when and who's going to be involved or whether I'm even talking to the decision maker. I want to know all of that before I commit anything to paper and anything that looks like a proposal, but we call it fulfillment. And the reason we call it fulfillment is that it really, if it's done, if we execute in this order, in this process, it's really a formality. We've already worked out the terms for doing business before we committed to anything to paper. And it's really just a formalization of what we've already agreed to on a close. And that's the really graceful, high integrity way to close a sale. And then finally, we actually know that there's some psychology about buyer's remorse. Most people have buyer's remorse about any purchase of consequence. And so we want to make sure that they're completely happy with the decision they made, that it was not under duress or they felt no pressure from us. And then it's much less likely to get, vetoed or overridden, or I don't know if any of you have experienced having a significant sale, have them back out after they already shook hands, maybe even stopped a check or held on a PO or whatever. But if you experience that kind of thing, you want to understand the way to mitigate buyer's remorse. The other things we do in the post-sale is we make sure there's a track forward for us. We know exactly how we're going to start our process together, our relationship together once post-sale. And we're also going to use the opportunity to find out who else they know who might benefit from what we do and get some referrals or introductions. So that's the Sandler selling system. And this is the way we beat the traditional model. So the benefits is we assert some control. Now it's shared control. It's mutual control. It's not domination. The old model, the default model, it's pretty much handing over all control to the prospect. And, they tell us the hoop they want us to jump through and we jump. The other thing that we benefit is we save time. We're not spending so much time on follow-up. We know, again, where we are in the process at any given point in time. We have the opportunity to, instead of flying by the seat of our pants, to actually duplicate or replicate the positive results that we experience in a team sales approach, or with our manager. If we're a salesperson, our manager can debrief the calls and understand exactly what we mean by the degree of qualification for a prospect. And it isn't ambiguous. It isn't different from each salesperson. The other thing that's great about it is it helps us diagnose our situation. We can recognize problems when they happen, and it's often easier to find an alternative track or way to breathe new life into the process. So those are the benefits. And just overall, it's the front end of the process is establishing and maintaining our relationship, the psychology of human bonding and rapport. The 3 middle steps are all about qualifying the prospect, and then the last 2 steps are fulfillment and post-sell. So it's a simple system conceptually, but it's a difficult system to apply because it does run counter to the culture. Most people, when they ask you for a quote, expect you to just give it to them. And if we want to be good stewards of our interests, we can say, happy to give you a quote, but first, can I ask you some questions? Because I want to give you a good quote. And I'm not sure I can, just based on what I know about the project yet. It also requires practice to develop any kind of mastery of execution. And so that's why in our model, we do a training model that's ongoing reinforcement. We work with our clients sometimes, at least for months, if not years, to help them to get the mastery of executing this system we talk about. So we believe that good selling is noble and honest, and it's really all about establishing trust. It's all about seeking truth and finding exactly what's going on before we propose. And we really believe no is an okay answer. We are not about pressure. We're all about, I actually want them to convince me they're a good fit instead of the other way around. I think that's pretty high integrity. So the last order of business, if you could chat your questions or lessons learned, I'd really appreciate it. And again, there's my email address. If you want to shoot me an email, if you'd like to, challenge me on anything I've said today, even if you think it's total BS. Shoot me an email. Appreciate an opportunity to explain myself. If anything smacked against your sensibilities, you want a deeper understanding, or even if you want to again challenge me, but please do reach out to me. Happy to talk to you. And thank you, Laurie. I really appreciate this opportunity for the webinar.
Thank you, Joe. Before we go, there is one more question from Catherine. Catherine is wondering, how do you ask for a referral or an introduction from a current customer?
Okay, my favorite way is pretty brain dead simple, Catherine. It's I like to say, hey, Laurie, gosh, I'm just getting kind of oriented to your group of, I don't know whether, if it's in the same company, I might say, I'm just getting oriented to your whole company. If you were me, who would you talk to in your facility? Now this Catherine, this psychology is that people tend to want to help other people if they sense that that they're deferring to their wisdom, their advice. And so it's more potent instead of saying, hey, Laurie, who do you know in this company I should be talking to? If you just simply rephrase it to, if you were me, Laurie, who would you want to know? Who would you want to meet? In fact, it really works good at networking events. If you're at a big networking event and you only know one person there, ask that person, especially if they're connected to dozens of people there, ask that person, hey, who should I know here? If you were me, who would you be talking to? Knowing what you know about my business, knowing what you know about me, who would you? And then just let them introduce you. That's, the other way you can make it easy for someone to offer an introduction or referral is be specific about what kind of people are a good referral for you. So you could say, hey, Laurie, I've been wondering, I've been looking, the people that really benefit from what we do are the small manufacturers who are really suffering the higher steel and aluminum prices, and they've got a whole bunch of customers who that maybe they gave heavy discounts to keep them through 2008, 2009, 2010, and now they're trying to live down that discount and increase their prices so they can maintain their margins after the materials inflation. Do you know anybody who's dealing with those issues? If you were me, who would you be talking to that has those issues? So that's just an example. That's how I would ask for a referral. I want to be descriptive so I don't make them have to work to figure out who would be a good fit referral. I give them enough of description so hopefully some names pop into their head. All right?
Great. Thank you, Joe. Well, thank you again to all of our attendees. We will get a copy of Joe's slides out to each of you so you have it for reference and you'll have Joe's contact information. Thank you again for being a part of this, Joe. We really appreciate you sharing your expertise, a lot of good information that you shared with us today.
Thank you so much, Laurie, and thank you everybody that's on board, whoever you are. I hope to cross paths with you someday. Take care.
Great. Have a good day afternoon, everybody. Bye-bye.